My mom sold my stuff and pawned my laptop. I called the cops, had her arrested, and filed a restraining order. Christmas dinner was almost finished when my father put down his fork, looked me directly in the eye, and said, "You are a burden, and you can no longer live with us." At first, I assumed I had misheard him. My mother let out a strange, nervous laugh, as if she wasn't convinced he was serious. But then he simply sat there, staring at me, waiting for a reaction. The room went silent. My younger sister Lily froze with her fork halfway into her mouth. She glanced at me with wide eyes, as if she couldn't believe what she'd just heard. I swallowed the slice of ham I was chewing and set my fork down. "What?" "You heard me," he stated. "You've overstayed your welcome. You need to move out." The reality check. I just sat there, trying to process. I was 23. I had a regular career and could have left long ago, but I stayed because they needed me. I paid the energy bill, internet, and groceries most weeks, which they couldn't afford because my father had been unemployed for years and my mother only worked part-time. I was not a burden. I was the reason the lights remained on in that house. And now, out of nowhere, I'm being tossed out like a useless freeloader. Mom has finally spoken up. "Maybe we should talk about this later." "No," Dad interrupted. "This is my house, I make the rules, and I say he's done here." Lily's fear. Lily set down her fork. She was barely 16, and I could tell she was afraid. She looked at our parents as if she didn't recognize them. What did it mean for her that they could throw me out so easily? I took a deep breath. I wasn't about to argue or plead. What if they wanted me out? Fine. But they were not prepared for what that really meant. I slumped back in my chair. "All right," I said. Dad sat up straighter, as if he had won an imaginary fight. Mom still looked uneasy, but she said nothing. Perhaps she was in shock. Perhaps she didn't care as much as I imagined she would. I stood up, grabbed my plate, and took it to the sink. I didn't want to give them the reaction they expected. Instead, I gazed at Lily, who remained tight and uncertain. I gave her a slight nod. She was the only one at the table that I still cared about. Dad sipped his drink, as if nothing had happened. Mom returned to picking at her mashed potatoes. Lily continued looking at me, as if she wanted to say something, but didn't. I did not remain to complete dinner. I just walked out. The silent goodbye. That night, I walked directly to my room, closed the door, and began packing. I wasn't going to waste time figuring out why they were doing this. If they wanted me gone, I was gone. However, this meant they would lose all I had paid for. And I wasn't about to warn them. I packed quietly, but I could hear them talking below. Mom's voice sounded low and terrified. Dad's tone sounded forceful, as if he were attempting to persuade her of anything. I caught bits and pieces. "He's old enough. We can handle it. He should have moved out years ago." An hour later, Lily knocked at my door. I opened it, and she slipped inside, closing it behind her. She appeared distressed, her eyes red as if she had been sobbing. "What the hell was that?" she said. "I don't know," I replied, tucking my laptop into my bag. "But I'm leaving tomorrow." She shakes her head. "That's crazy. You pay for everything? They can't even afford food without you." "Not my problem anymore." Lily bit her lip, clearly attempting to keep back more tears. "Where are you going?" "I'll figure it out." The fact was that I had some money saved up, but I had not intended on moving out so soon. I'd have to locate a place quickly, perhaps staying at a friend's for a while. But I wasn't concerned. I would be all right. They would not. Lily paused. "Can I?" She stopped herself. I knew what she'd ask. She wanted to join me. But she was still in high school, and as much as I disliked leaving her behind, I couldn't bring her with me. "You know they'd never let that happen," you said. She stared down at the floor. "Yeah." I finished packing while she stood there, as if she didn't want to go. Finally, she sighed. "You're going to regret this." I grinned. "I know." The next morning, I left before they even awoke. I hauled my bags downstairs, loaded my car, and took one last glance around the house. There's no sadness. No regrets. Just relief. Then, as I was driving out of the driveway, I entered my banking app and erased my name off all bills. Electric, internet, water. Even the Netflix account I had paid for each of them. Without me, everything would shut down within a month. I grinned, put my car into drive, and drove away without looking back. For the next few days, I stayed at my friend Jake's apartment while looking for a place of my own. His sofa sucked. His dog, Max, would not stop looking at me while I tried to sleep. His roommate repeatedly asked, "Are you staying forever?" But none of this mattered. Because I was free. No more paying for a house that I didn't want to live in. No longer pretending to appreciate a man who threw me out of Christmas dinner. No more being regarded as a walking ATM. I was finally doing something for myself. 3 days after I left, my phone started ringing. Initially, I ignored it. 7 missed calls from my mother. My father called me twice, which surprised me because he seldom did. Lily sent a handful of SMS. I also ignored those. Until she sent it. "They're freaking out, the power's been cut off." I grinned. They honestly believed that the bills would magically pay themselves. Then, another text. "Dad's losing his mind. He said you did something to the house." Oh, this was getting better. I could just imagine Dad stomping about in the dark, cursing at my mother while she cried over the Wi-Fi being down. An hour later, my phone called again. This time, I responded. The moment I took up the phone, my mother's voice hit me like a hurricane. "Kevin, we don't know what happened. The power's out. The internet's down. The water bill." "You didn't pay," I replied simply. Silence. Then, in a hushed voice, "You paid for these?" I nearly laughed. "Are you serious? Who else did you think was paying for them?" She paused. "Your father said." She interrupted herself. I already knew. My father was too proud to acknowledge he didn't know how things worked. He presumably assured her that everything would be all right. That the house would function flawlessly even without me. "Not my problem anymore," I said. "Kevin, please, we didn't mean..." I hung up. Not my problem anymore. I assumed that was the end of it. They would figure it out. Perhaps my father will finally get off his ass and get a job. Perhaps my mother would work more hours. Perhaps they will sell something to keep the lights on. Either way, it's not my concern. The next morning, I awoke to a message from my bank. Fraud alert. A suspicious login attempt was detected. I sat up fast, my heart racing. I checked my email. 3 additional alerts. Someone had attempted to enter my account. And I already recognized who it was. I quickly logged in and went over my purchases. Nothing had been taken yet. But there it was. An attempt to reset a password. Another failed login. Then a third. I clenched my jaw. My father must have been quite desperate, calling Lily. I phoned Lily, she responded right away. "I was just about to call you," she said quietly. "Dad's freaking out. He keeps yelling about money. He was on the computer all morning." I breathed sharply. Trying to get into my bank account. She was silent for a second before cursing beneath her breath. "Does he have my old passwords?" I inquired. "Probably," she confessed. "You know how Mom used to keep them in that little notebook by the computer." I knew it. My father must have gone through that, figuring I'd be stupid enough to continue using the same passwords from high school. "Kevin," Lily whispered. Her voice shook. "He's really pissed. I think..." She paused. I heard shouts in the background. My father's booming voice, the banging of doors, and my mother crying. "I think he's going to do something stupid." Lily's words sent shivers down my spine. "What do you mean? What did he say?" I inquired, squeezing my phone more tightly. She lowered her voice. "He's saying you ruined us. That you did this on purpose to screw him over. He's talking about calling the cops." I nearly laughed. "For what? Not paying his bills?" "I don't know," she hissed. "He's losing it. Mom's crying, saying she'll talk to you, but he won't listen. He keeps saying, he's not gonna get away with this. Kevin, I think he wants to go after you." That took the smile off my face. I had expected my father to get desperate. To beg. Perhaps even try to guilt trip me. But to believe he would gain revenge on me? That was a new level of foolishness. Locking down everything. "Lock your door," I instructed her. "If he does something crazy, call me." I hung up and quickly changed all of my passwords. Bank accounts, email, streaming services, even my Amazon login. Then I called my bank to report the hacking attempt. They had locked my account so tightly that I even had difficulty logging in for a few hours. I assumed that was the end of it. I was completely mistaken. That night, Jake and I were hanging out in his apartment, playing some ridiculous Xbox game. Then, bang! Someone slammed the door. Hard. Jake paused the game. "Are you expecting someone?" I was not. I already got a horrible feeling. I got up, walked to the peephole, and my stomach dropped. It was my father. He was standing in the corridor, hands clenched and breathing like a bull prepared to charge. Jake asked, Who is it? I stepped back from the door. My dad. Jake stood up. Dude, what's going on? Bang. Kevin, open the door. I did not move. Bang. This time, it's harder. I know you're in there. You think you can just walk away from this? Jake scowled at me. Dude, should we? Before he finished, my father kicked the door in. Calling 911. That was it. I grabbed my phone and called 911. My dad just showed up at my apartment, I told the dispatcher. He's banging on the door, yelling at me, and he just tried to kick it in. Jake stepped back. Kevin, this is crazy. I met his gaze. Yeah, I know. I held the phone to my ear while my father continued yelling, You ungrateful little. You think you can just walk away? You owe us? You? Sir, officers are on their way. The dispatcher stated. 2 minutes later, I heard sirens. Then my father's voice went silent. A knock at the door. Police, open up. I opened the door just in time to see 2 officers handcuff my father. His face was hot and his chest heaved, but as he noticed me standing there, his expression altered. There were no regrets. There is no humiliation. Just pure hatred. You did this, he muttered as he was dragged away. I simply stood there, unaffected. Because the reality was, he did this to himself. They took my father away that night, but I knew things weren't finished. An hour later, Lily called. Mom's losing it, she explained. She's crying and saying it's all your fault. Yeah, that sounds about right. She keeps saying you have to fix this. She's already calling people, trying to get bail money. I nearly laughed. With what money? Silence. Because we knew they didn't have any. No electricity. There's no internet. No savings. And now there is no father figure to yell at everyone while trying to be in charge. Without me, they were sinking quickly. I should have felt bad. But I only felt relief. Keep an eye on her, I advised Lily. If she does anything crazy, call me. Lily texted me the next morning. Mom's selling your stuff. I froze. Then I called her. She picked up immediately, her voice harsh. I told you to fix this? Are you selling my stuff? A pause. Then, bluntly. We need money, Kevin. I clenched my jaw. So you're stealing from me? You don't live here anymore, she yelled. You left all this behind. It's in our house, that makes it ours. She felt no regret. There is no guilt. It's just entitlement. I'm calling the cops. Don't you dare. I hung up. Then I phoned the cops. 2 hours later, I received a call back. We talked to your mother, the officer stated. She wasn't happy, but she's agreed to hold your things until you can pick them up. I messaged Lily. I'm coming over. But I should have realized they were not prepared. Because when I arrived at the house, something made my stomach plummet. My automobile, sitting on the driveway. It should not have been there, I had left it at Jake's flat. I turned off the engine, my heart thumping. My car wasn't simply here. It had been driven. The front seat was folded back, as if someone had sat in it. The glove compartment was open, and, worst of all, the gas tank was nearly empty. I clenched my fist. They'd stolen my car. The confrontation before I could exit, the front door swung open. My mother stepped outside, arms crossed. You called the cops on me? She remarked. You stole my car, I snapped back. She scoffed. It was just sitting there? You weren't using it. I stared at her, trying to grasp the absurdity of this logic. It's my car. How did you even get it? She didn't respond. But I already knew. They had an extra key. Mom, I said, my voice dangerously calm. If you don't give me my key, I'm calling the cops again. Her expression flickered for a second. Then, without speaking, she stormed inside. A minute later, she returned and threw the key at me. It struck my chest and landed on the grass. There, she spat. Happy? I picked it up, trying not to be angry. I'm taking my things. And then I'm leaving, for good. I walked past her and into the home. Lily waited in the hall, looking nervous. She took your laptop and pawned it, she said quietly. I closed my eyes. Take a breath in, breathe out. Then I turned to my mother. Where's my laptop? She raised her chin. I told you. We needed money. That was it. I took out my phone, dialed 911 for the second time this week, and let her watch. Yes, I want to report a stolen vehicle and stolen property, I responded, looking her dead in the eyes. My mother has just revealed that she pawned my laptop without authorization. Her face lost its color. This time, she was the one who had to deal with the police. My mother worried when she realized I wasn't bluffing. "You can't do this," she muttered, her tone low. "I'm your mother." I ignored her. "Yes, officer. I have proof that she admitted to taking my belongings and pawning them," I stated over the phone. "I want to press charges." Lily stood motionless, her gaze flitting between us. My mother's hands were shaking now. She was absolutely taken aback, as if she believed she could keep pushing and I would never push back. "Kevin," she said again, this time softly, like if she were pleading. "We're struggling. Your father's in jail." I had no choice. "You had a choice," I explained. "You could have worked more. You could have sold your own stuff. You could have asked for help instead of throwing me out like garbage." She blinked rapidly, her face contorted. I was angry. I laughed. "Yeah, so was I." I heard sirens outside. My mother jumped. A few minutes later, 2 officers walked through the door. "Sir, did you call about the stolen property?" one of them inquired. I nodded and pointed to my mother. "She took my laptop and pawned it. I want to press charges." My mother gasped as if I'd stabbed her. "Kevin, don't do this." The officers turned to her. "Ma'am, is this true?" She hesitated, her gaze shifting between me, Lily, and the cops. I could see her calculating, attempting to determine whether she could lie her way out of this. Then Lily spoke. "She told him herself. Just before he called you." My mother snapped her head at Lily so quickly, it was almost frightening. "You little..." "Ma'am." One of the cops interrupted her. "Do you have a receipt from the pawn shop?" Her face fell. She knew what was coming. They took her outside. I looked through the window while they spoke with her for a few minutes. Handcuffs appeared unexpectedly. She was straining, crying, and yelling. Neighbors looked through their blinds. The entire street most likely heard her weeping about how she was simply a struggling mother and how unjust this was. Lily stood beside me, looking out the window. She gulped hard. "Is this really happening?" I nodded. "Yes." And for the first time in a long time, I felt calm. The text message. My phone buzzed with a message from an unexpected number. "You're going to regret this." My chest tightened. I read it again. Then I realized, my father had been released on bond. When I saw that message, I knew exactly what had occurred. Someone had bailed my father out, and I had a fairly solid idea who. Probably one of his old drinking cronies, or perhaps a distant family member who hadn't heard the entire story. In any case, he was done and angry. I showed Lily the text. Her face turned pallid. "Kevin, you need to leave." "No," I replied. I turned to face the cops, who were still outside dealing with my mother. "Can I go in and get the rest of my stuff?" One of them nodded. "As long as it's okay with your sister." Lily was already moving. "Let's make this quick." We walked upstairs and packed everything that was mine. Clothes, old video games. Even the silly things I had left behind, thinking I'd come back for them one day. I was not coming back. Ever. As I took the last box to my car, my mother was still crying in the driveway, pleading with the officers to let her go. "This is a misunderstanding. He's my son. He wouldn't do this to me." I just strolled by her, unconcerned. She screamed my name, as if it would suddenly change anything. I got in my car. Lily stood in front of my window, shuffling from foot to foot. "I don't want to stay here." I exhaled. "I know you don't, but you only have 2 years until you're 18. She nodded with watery eyes. "I'll be fine. I'll just be quiet and keep my head down. Call me if anything happens." She nodded again. Then headlights arrived on the roadway. An automobile turned onto our street. My stomach sank. It was my father. He pulled up right as I started the engine. He hardly had time to go before I put it in reverse and backed into the street. He stared at me with hatred in his eyes, as if he were about to approach and try something. I rolled down my window just enough to carry my voice. "You try to come near me again, I'm filing a restraining order." His hands tightened into fists. "You think you're better than us?" I smiled. "I know I am." Then I drove away. It was the last time I saw them. I blocked my parents' phone numbers, changed my financial information, moved, and never looked back. Lily's independence. Lily kept out for 2 years, just as she promised. She left as soon as she turned 18. She moved in with a buddy and headed off to college. We're still talking all the time. The consequences? My parents? My father never had a job. My mother lost the house a year later. They bounced around for a while, destroying relationships with family. And the last I heard, they were renting a dilapidated flat in a poor neighborhood. They attempted to reach out to me, Facebook messages, unknown numbers, even letters. I never responded because they had made their pick for Christmas dinner, and I made mine. Thank you for watching. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do so and hit the notification bell to stay updated with more shocking real-life stories happening around you.